Hi, I'm Rachel Abbasi. Welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. As always, thanks for spending time with me.
Hello and happy Tuesday. Today I wanted to talk about life on life's terms. I went to my in-person meeting last night, and this was the topic, living life on life's terms. And although what we were talking about last night was in sobriety, like how do you, um, what does that mean? Does it mean that I just have to accept everything and I never get upset about anything? Or, what does that mean? And what are the tools that I can take away from that phrase? And so it was a really good meeting. And then this morning I was thinking, well, what does that mean in stroke recovery? And I felt just like I always do. I feel like my sobriety, the tools for emotional sobriety translate very well over to the emotional recovery that we go through after we've had a stroke. So it's living life on life's terms is learning how to live in this reality that I didn't choose, and learning how to accept that I don't get to control what happens. It can be very frustrating coming to that realization that I don't get to control my own body. I say all the time, I've been saying for years on the podcast that the only thing I can control is within my fingertips. And what if I can't control that? What if I don't get to choose what hurts? I don't get to choose when I'm dizzy and when I'm not dizzy, when I feel sick, when I'm in pain. Then does that throw that all out the window? Like, learning how to choose how I respond to the pain and the lack of control and the frustration. That's where my serenity can either grow or it can disappear, depending on what actions I take. So there's this illusion of control before a stroke, or for those who have never had a stroke, it's like we believe that we are the director of the show as far as anything that's within our fingertips. Like if I work hard enough, if I push hard enough, if I plan enough, then life will just cooperate, and so will my body. But those of us who have experienced a life-changing health event, that illusion is shattered, and our bodies no longer listen to what we're telling it to do. My plans, I realized after my stroke, and this was a hard realization for me, that my plans didn't matter anymore. My stroke forced this realization that, and even though I learned it in sobriety, I don't have control of people, places, and things. It just reinforced it. I don't have control of some of these additional layers of life that I thought I did. And that was devastating for me to realize. I got to this point where like I felt so helpless that I can't even plan my future anymore. Um, Wanting to control the uncontrollable is one of the biggest challenges I think, in my journey of sobriety. Um, we just assume, and I just talked about this, I don't know if it was yesterday or late last week, that we feel like that natural reaction is if I try harder, then I will gain control. I can fix everything. I can control people. I can control timelines. I can control outcomes. And I needed to learn that what I need to seek is connection with other people, not to control them, but to learn from them. And then in stroke recovery, I've learned the same thing that in this coming to this realization that I don't even have control of my own body and my own pain and really my own recovery timeline, um, I needed to connect with other people and learn about, well, how did you handle this emotionally? How did you handle this? Because recovery, it seems to me that one thing is trending across all those in stroke recovery. Like, we don't have control over how fast we recover, and often it is not even nearly as fast as we would want to, if ever. Like some of these things, I just assumed that this headache was going to go away. Who has a headache for the rest of their lives? But that's what I've got, and it's dependent on how I behave, and it's just a bizarre place to be. That typically what I was learning in sobriety is how I respond emotionally to things, um, creates the how I respond to situations creates the outcome. Let me see if I can explain that a little better. Um, if I'm interacting with somebody and they make me angry and I react and I just blow up at them, then there is, I can't think of the word. There is a, like, um, oh boy, I can't think of the word. This is what happens when you listen to a stroke podcast. So bear with me. Um, there is I can't think of the word, the reaction, like what happens if I blow up. The repercussions, I guess, is the word I'm thinking of, maybe. There, there's a result that happens if I react. Well, in stroke recovery, I need to do the same kind of pause, and I need to take that time to respond instead of react to my environment, my physical environment, so that I control how much my eyes move and what I'm exposed to. Because if I just react to things, if I just try to engage with life the way that I used to, then my symptoms are going, there's the repercussions of that. So I don't know if I articulated that as well as I have it in my head, that connection between the two. But um, when my when I don't take that pause, and I that when I don't take that pause and I react, I am trying to control the uncontrollable almost every time. So pausing in the same way that I learned how to do it in sobriety is is translatable into stroke recovery. So there is this, that's not to say that there's not this like emotional tension that builds up when life is happening and I can't react. I have that pause that we're taking is often filled with frustration, anger, and fear. So wanting to control and not being able to, and my expectations aren't being met, um, is like the birthplace, I feel like, of this like tension, this emotional tension. And I believe during that time that that tension exists, that I should be able to control this. And I just keep telling myself, you can't. I just keep like reinforcing that you can't control people, places, and things. You can't control people, places, and things. So here's an example. When I was in early stroke recovery and I was applying for long-term disability, um, I had the claims person, the claims examiner, or whatever she's called me and she said, "You are going to be denied for long-term disability." And I was about to pop a top, as I like to say, because things were not, my expectations were not being met. Not only were my expectations not being met, but it didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense that I was suffering and this company was not going to give me what I needed in order to be able to live, literally live with the condition that I was a victim of, like I had a stroke. Who do who are you to tell me that I don't get the insurance that I have paid for my entire life and now it's time for me to use it and you're telling me um I'm not going to be approved? And I was this close to popping a top. And because of my sobriety program, I paused. And I put myself in her shoes and I realized, I mean, this happened in an instant. This happened in an instant. And I said, I understand that you're just doing your job, but what can I do to change this? Because it doesn't make sense to me. What records do you have that shows that I'm fine and I can work? And so because I responded that way, she she gave me the information I needed. And then I was able to do the next right thing, contact the doctor that had put inaccurate information into my records, and I ended up being approved at the end. But it's this need to control. Like what I wanted to do was crawl through the phone and do her job for her, you know? So it's like, it doesn't mean living life on life's terms is not feeling the feelings. It's feeling the feelings, but not having them dictate my behavior. It doesn't mean that I don't get angry. It doesn't mean that I don't get upset or feel grief or frustration. Like I allow those feelings to happen. And that example was more of a emotional sobriety kind of angle, but the same applies when I'm like, yesterday I was gardening. I was picking weeds yesterday morning. And every time I stood up, I got really dizzy and I felt like my eyes almost seemed like they were crossing. It was an odd feeling and it was all in my head and I definitely felt like the tension in my head was increasing and I felt like I need to stop. But I was frustrated. I was I was a little upset because I want to pick weeds. I want to be out in the sun. I want to enjoy the nice weather that's starting to happen. And then I was feeling grief that, well, what am I gonna, I started fast forwarding and thinking, well, great, I'm not gonna be able to enjoy my new garden. I'm not gonna, well, living life on life's terms does not mean that I'm not allowed to feel that way. Like, I need to allow that to happen. Um, and I need to not judge myself for feeling that stuff. But what I need to do is pause, stop what I'm doing, stop gardening for a hot second, and think about what's the next right thing to do right now. Like, those feelings that I'm feeling are a human condition. It's the symptoms of being human. And my body has undergone an extreme event. And I don't give myself enough credit for being in recovery and listening to my body. So allowing those feelings to come, but pause and respond. So the reaction for me would be because I'm angry, I'm frustrated, and I'm feeling a bit of grief, is to just don't stand up and keep crawling around and picking the weeds because that's what I want to do. And I'm at that point, I'm fighting what my body is telling me to do. Um, so the emotional recovery is feeling the feelings, but then responding to the feelings. And that response is, Rachel, I'm my own mother. Rachel, you need to go inside, get some water, and sit down. It doesn't mean that I can't go back outside and pick weeds later or pick weeds tomorrow or next week, pick weeds once a week or something like that. But it's allowing the feelings to happen, but don't allow them to run the show. And running the show is I keep resisting. I'm not practicing acceptance. So that to me is living life on life's terms and stroke recovery. Um, in in sobriety, it's like the difference. You cannot drink and not be emotionally sober. And that's what we call being a dry drunk. So it's like my life changed. I stopped drinking, but my mindset didn't change. So in stroke recovery, it's like my life changed, but my mindset didn't change. It's being resentful, trying to control, blaming, and getting stuck in whatever it is that's happening, as opposed to accepting reality, accepting responsibility for my response to those feelings, having the willingness to grow through the difficulty. Like, what did I hear yesterday? The experience and wisdom comes from going through the hard stuff. And stroke recovery, without the emotional recovery, um, it will feel like constant resistance. Um, I also heard last night somebody said, if I'm not the problem, then there's no solution. So it took me a while and I'm back in that mindset that I'm like, what does that actually mean? If I'm not the problem, then there's no solution. Like, if I can't control people, places, and things, how can I ever solve a problem? If I'm not the problem, then there's no solution. Um, Instead of thinking why is this happening to me? Trying to find blame, trying to point fingers. Um, what do they say? When you point when you point your finger, there's three more pointing back at you. Um, how can I resolve this issue within myself? Because I can't change the fact that at that very moment, I can no longer pick weeds, or am going to make it worse. So my power lives in my response. It doesn't live in changing reality. Um, I live a lot in expectations, and it's something that I try to work out every day. I always feel like, well, I should be able to do this. This shouldn't be this hard. I should be further along in recovery. People should understand how I feel. And none of these expectations changes reality. Um, those expectations are simply resentments in waiting. I'm either going to get pissed off at my body for not being able to do what it should be able to, quote unquote, should be able to do. I'm going to be resentful towards other people for not understanding the pain that I'm living in. Or I'm going to be resentful towards God. And that's the last thing that I want to do, especially when I'm trying to develop this relationship with my understanding of God. So there is this gap between expectations and reality, and that is where frustration grows. If the closer that I can merge those two together, expectations and reality, um, the quicker that I can accept. Um, I hear a lot in sobriety, and I heard it last night. Misery is optional, even in stroke recovery, where my pain is not optional. Like, my stroke brings me daily physical discomfort, daily limitations, and daily unpredictability. But misery is if I resist the reality. If I try to compare my life to other people who have never had a stroke, if I try to compare myself to people who have had a stroke and don't have a headache all the time, if I try to compare myself, my deficits to another stroke survivor's deficits, like, I'm always focusing on what's missing in my life. And I heard that last night as well. Somebody said, I used to look at my life um, as valleys, like continuous valleys where this is when things got bad in my life. And then this was another time in my life when things got bad. And the person said, now I look at my life as peaks. And this is where my life was beautiful and wonderful. And this again was a time when everything was wonderful, And what that means to me is shifting my mindset, as I mentioned earlier, to gratitude and acceptance and presence, like being present. If I'm always focusing on the past and when things are hard, or focusing on the future and what my limitations are, what I can't do, then that's suffering. I'm choosing to emotionally suffer. Um, that suffering is shaped by my perspective on life. Um, Gratitude is feels difficult when things are hard. Um, I'm not pretending like things are okay. I I truly feel gratitude today. Um, because I'm trying not to, and some days I'm not successful, some days I am, but I'm trying to focus on um the things that I have. So like when I go to bed at night and I say my gratefuls before bed, I always, one of those gratefuls is I'm grateful for my body because I do recognize every day, I recognize the things that I got to do that day because my stroke didn't take away fill in the blank. Um, I have control over my limbs. And so I do see that things could have been worse. And I still have a lot of things worth noticing. So I practice that on a daily basis. And it helps me when I say I'm grateful for my body. I I run through what I did that day that that I'm grateful I was able to do. Um, Whether it's walking my dog down to the water or uh, throwing the ball with my dogs or um, even things like cleaning, like I do like to clean, but for somebody who may not necessarily like to clean, what what would your life look like if you did not have the ability to clean? So gratitude doesn't erase hardship, but gratitude does soften the edges, I feel like. So, that's really what I have for today. Um, I think that living life on life's terms is is finding gratitude when we're struggling. It's an amazing practice. It reminds me of going to the gym, that we have to, it's a muscle. And if I continue to practice that mind shift, a lot of times I feel like Pollyanna here, but I'm not BSing. Like this is truly how I live, but that that practice started 10 years ago for me. Even though I had my stroke 5 years ago, the tools that I learned in my sobriety have helped me immensely with how to live life on life's terms when I feel like so much has really been stolen from me. So many limitations in my life, but being able to now carry that gratitude forward from to be able to be emotionally sober through stroke recovery has been a gift. And it's I'm passionate about sharing that with other stroke survivors because I don't want anybody to suffer the way that I know we are so capable of suffering as stroke survivors. So I hope this was helpful to somebody out there. And if you have any feedback or you want to reach out, I can be contacted at rachel@recoverydailypodcast.com. And if you don't mind, just like the episode, and that would be super helpful to me. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.